The song you hear is in a language spoken by a little over 2,000 people on the Isle of Man, a small island located between Great Britain and Ireland, and a self-governing territory of the United Kingdom. The Manx language was at one stage thought to be extinct, but has experienced a revival in recent years. And this leads me to my guest for this episode, Ellie, who was born on the Isle of Man in a small village, but now lives on the other side of the world in Tasmania's Huon Valley. She developed a passion for boats and sailing in her teenage years, but it wasn't until many years later that she left her office job on the Isle of Man for an adventure sailing across the Atlantic down to Argentina. This gave her a taste for life on the seas and led to a 6-month sailing around the Pacific, and then later perhaps the most pivotal adventure for this story, circumnavigating Australia on the tall ship the Endeavour as a crew member. And this was her first contact with the shores of Tasmania. And after working on super yachts for several years around the world with her partner, Ellie fell pregnant for a second time, and it was then that they decided that Hobart would be the place to settle and raise a family. But what would make someone from a small island decide to settle on another island all the way on the other side of the world? Listen on to learn why and what makes Manx unique, and what Ellie found familiar and different about Tasmania.
I'm from a little village called Mary, which is predominantly like a fishing village in the Isle of Man down the south area. And I was there, well, till I was 18, and then I went off to university for a little while, yeah.
And what sort of place was that to grow up in?
Oh, it was magical, you know, it was just free reign. We came home when the street lights went on, lots of beaches, lots of coast to explore. So, yeah, it was ideal, really, as a childhood.
What was there to do, I mean, in a place that small? What kind of community was it, I guess?
Oh, it was a beautiful community, like small communities always are. In terms of what there was to do, I guess you just kind of use your imagination, really. I mean, there was the usual sports that you could do on the weekends. You know, we used to go to the rollerdrome quite a lot and go to Douglas, a little town, there was cinemas. So you had the basics there, really, for what you needed.
I'm sort of drawing a few comparisons with Tasmania here, but is it the sort of place where everyone sort of knows everyone and there's just only a couple of degrees of
separation? Absolutely, yeah. Everyone knows everyone's business. It is very similar. Lots of people are related. But there is also a big influx of people that move to the Isle of Man because of its industry there, which is, you know, offshore banking and things like that. So there was, you know, a fair few people coming in.
What are like maybe your strongest memories from your childhood? Like what sort of stands out?
I think, ironically, having beach days and things, they're probably so few and far between. When you were down the beach, it was fantastic, and you know, the ocean being probably just as cold as the ocean down here in Tasmania. But yeah, and just spending a lot of time outdoors, really. I guess the unique things about the Isle of Man is like the horse-drawn tram that goes across the Douglas Promenade and things like that. That sort of stands out, and yeah, different things like that, really.
And what did your family do, like for a living, I suppose?
Yeah, so my dad had like a catering business. He did, I guess, kind of Meals on Wheels and things like that, but good, wholesome food. At one point, he had a fish and chip shop. He had a sandwich business. He had a bakery. He's sort of quite entrepreneurial, really. And yeah, they ran the commercial kitchen from the house, so very busy household all the time, but always sort of around for us as well.
What did people most live from?
Finance, I'd say finance and shipping. Like the ship registry back then was big in the Isle of Man. Yeah, sort of offshore industries. It was always sort of quite easy to get a job there, I guess, and quite a well-paid job. And I think what's sort of reflecting back with Tasmania, they say a lot of people sort of leave, young people, and don't come back, whereas with the Isle of Man, it's kind of ideal. If you go off to university and then you want to go travelling, you come back and it's quite easy to sort of get a well-paid job. So it's quite a draw card for people to come back to the island, definitely. I'd say like a good portion of my friends that I grew up with are still on the Isle of Man. Like there's not, you know, I'd say it was less than 50% that have left the island.
So when you were like growing up and at school, were you thinking that you would leave, or was it just thinking, well, I'll be here forever?
I think going to university, I was definitely looking forward to a bit of freedom. But, you know, like after university, I ended up going back there just because a lot of my friends had gone back there, and I missed it. Like, you know, city life's great for a small time, but the Isle of Man and the way that you live out there is quite unique, just that outdoor lifestyle. And so, yeah, I think one stage I was super keen to go off and get my independence, but I was just as keen to head back to the island for a while, yeah.
And like when you were at school, like did you have some idea of what the future held for you? Like did you have a plan?
No, none at all. Yeah. Not at all. And the wonderful thing about the Isle of Man back there, because it didn't have a university, all our fees were paid for. So we were deemed as international students as well. So it would have been a higher course fee at university. And then when it came to going to uni, I sort of thought, well, because it's all free, I might as well do something that I actually enjoy, as opposed to something that I see doing long term.
So what did you...
I ended up doing photography. Okay. Yeah. But as quite old school, I spent a lot of time at college in the darkroom. I'd go in the morning and I'd come out in the evening. And then by the time I got to university, it was sort of all digital pushed, which I wasn't as keen on, to be honest. So I went across to Preston, which is the University of Central Lancashire.
And was that a conscious choice, or was it a default choice?
It was a default choice. I actually, ironically, I was looking at like a college university down in South Wales called Newport, and they were mainly sport-based, which was another passion of mine, and art-based. But I didn't quite make it, so then it was sort of, where can I get in at late notice?
And did you think photography was going to lead to something else?
Not really. I guess for me, photography, I always just like doing like natural photography. I didn't really like doing portraits and things like that. And I don't really know where I thought it would lead. I have used it in my career, but it was definitely more of a passion-based thing than an actual career-based thing.
So you returned to the Isle of Man after your studies, and what did you do then?
I did work in Preston for a little while, but it wasn't a great salary. So I went back to the Isle of Man and I ended up getting a job working in shipping, so doing like ship management, which was absolutely fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed doing that, and I did that for probably about 4-5 years. And then an opportunity came up from a previous passion of mine, which was sort of sailing traditional boats. So I sort of jumped ship, so to speak, and went and did that. Took a sabbatical, sailed from Las Palmas in Spain all the way down to Ushuaia in Argentina. Came back to work and sort of realised that I'd like to try and make that a bit of a career.
So how did all that come about, and where did your passion start?
I was sponsored as a teenager when I was probably about 14, 15 by our local commissioners, so by our local parish. And every year they would select 2 people to go and sail on this youth vessel. And I had the best week doing that, sort of learning new skills, doing rope work. And then they would ask me to come back and volunteer. So I did that for possibly the next 3 or 4 years. So whilst my friends were going abroad to Spain and things, I'd spend my summers hopping on this sort of training vessel, most of the time with underprivileged youths going on board. Okay. So it was a real insight for me and an eye-opener, and definitely a good life experience, having been from a quite sheltered island.
And was that also about learning crewing skills and just learning about working on a boat?
Yep, so lots of rope work, things like doing splicing. I was doing like the bosun rolls, so doing engine checks and things like that. Yeah, it was a fantastic experience.
When you decided that this may be the life for me, where did you go with that?
So I quit my job and I actually got offered a really good role doing a lot of the sort of European regattas and things. And then just at the last minute, a job opportunity came out in New Zealand, and it was a vessel that would spend the summer sailing in New Zealand and then head out to the South Pacific and go to many, many remote islands. Whilst it wasn't my ideal position that I wanted on board, I just thought this opportunity wouldn't come again. So flew out to New Zealand and I joined that ship.
And so what was that experience like?
Oh, incredible, absolutely incredible. Sort of very basic living, just went with a backpack, was out there for just shy of a year, but an incredible experience to go to these remote islands and see these communities and get to experience how life is on different islands many, many miles away.
Is there a particular place that sort of you remember or have best memories of, perhaps?
I think Vanuatu for me is like one of my favourite places I went to, and especially Tanner Island, where they have the volcano and quite unique cultures there. I think the John Frum Society is one of them. Lots of, very influenced areas from Europeans and things heading out there.
Yeah, that's where they have the cult of Prince Philip.
That's the one. Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. Yeah. And they never actually met him, apparently. It was just the royal yacht sailed past there at one point, and that was enough for them to worship him. I think in Vanuatu, in one of the villages, they sort of slapped the ocean and they made the most amazing noise. I've never seen or experienced anything like it, like the music that they made from hitting the water. It was just incredible.
So you were sort of sailing around the Pacific for a whole year?
6 months. 6 months. Yeah. So Tonga, Fiji, Vanuatu and New Caledonia, then back to New Zealand. I flew back to the Isle of Man. I secured another job working in shipping, a different company that I found a bit more difficult with, probably more mainstream company. And I was there 2 weeks before I had a phone call from one of my shipmates saying the Endeavour's about to do a circumnavigation of Australia. They've had some crew pulled out. Are you interested in coming out and spending 12 months circumnavigating Australia? So I handed my notice in again.
Well, that's a once in a lifetime offer, isn't it?
Absolutely, it really is. And because I'd only been working, 2 weeks, and tall ships don't really pay the best salary. It's more sort of beer funds, slush funds. So I had to ask if they could pay my airfare out there and deduct it on my first pay.
Right. And so Endeavour, obviously a tall ship. What did that experience entail?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, the replica vessel, it was an old coal carrier, so very rounded hull and very sort of uncomfortable in the water at times. So I remember the first day leaving Sydney Heads, and I could just hear so many people vomiting, and I just thought, what have I signed up for the next 12 months? But yeah, a truly incredible and humbling experience sailing around Australia.
And what was the purpose of that trip?
It was an outreach program. So the replica is usually based in the museum in Sydney and National Maritime Museum. And so whilst it's there and alongside, it's set up as a museum, and people can come through and see what it would have been similar like experience being on board the Endeavour. And that's what we did. Each time we reached port, we would set up the museum for a week or two and open to the public, which was hugely successful. And then when it was time to leave and go to the next port, we'd have about 40 people join the vessel and learn how to sail.
And what was your role on board?
So my role was a stewardess, but I would write a daily blog. So every day I'd do a bit of writing, and a photographer. So the photography did come in useful at that point. And also, with a vessel like that, it's many hands. So, on board, steering on the helm, helping with the lines, doing the ropes, bit of everything really.
So was that mostly young people or just...
No, a real mixed bag, huge mixed bag. I think you had to be at least 18 to be on board. And yeah, all walks of life really, just looking for an adventure or taking a break from their normal life, I guess. It's not the most luxurious holiday. You're sleeping in hammocks. It's pretty grueling. You're doing night watch. It can be obviously horrific weather, so lots of people would get seasick on board. So yeah, an experience for sure, whether it be a positive one or negative one.
In that time, did you think, I want to do more of this or have an idea of where this is going to lead?
Not really. I think I very much live in the moment, so I don't really think too far ahead. When the circumnavigation ended, I didn't know some of the crew were heading off and doing a bit of a road trip. They were from WA, so they were going to drive back home. And I guess then it was sort of like, oh, what am I going to do now? I'm back in Sydney. But I actually stayed on and carried on working on board the vessel. So whilst we called them the ship keeper, so basically the guardian of the boat when it was open, and make sure things are smoothly running on a day-to-day basis. Like I said, doesn't pay a lot of money back in Sydney. It's sort of quite an expensive place to be. I did get an office-based job for a few months, but it wasn't for me anymore. I wasn't settled in being in an office.
Yeah, it'll be a hard transition.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And then, we got the opportunity to then start working on some sort of, I guess you'd call them super yachts. Yeah.
And where did that sort of take you?
The first vessel, just kind of in Sydney Harbour and up to Ellie Beach. I can't say I really enjoyed the work on board, but it certainly paid quite well. That particular vessel, didn't really enjoy it, but then it had 3 owners, and one of the owners said, we've got this beautiful sort of gentleman cruisers, this little timber Scotch boat out in Spain. Would you be keen to go out and work on that one? So we headed out there, and beautiful boat. Not glamorous at all in terms of the super yachts, not plastic, beautiful timber. And we spent the summer out on there. And then we came back. They actually brought that boat back to Australia, purchased another one out in Turkey. So we just had endless summers. We went from Spain to Sydney, out to Turkey, back to Sydney.
What led to you being in Tasmania ultimately?
So I fell pregnant when we were out in Turkey doing the Turkish season. So I went back to Sydney for a little while, and then went back to the Isle of Man to have my child. And then my partner was still sort of working on the yachts, and we ended up moving out to Athens for a little while, and I fell pregnant again. So then we went back to the Isle of Man, and we were like, well, where are we going to go and what are we going to do? And I just had an epiphany one night, and I said, let's just move to Tasmania. Yeah, We'd been here, we sailed here on the Endeavour, and loved the coast, I found Hobart just the perfect kind of city for me, being from where I'm from. And so we were like, okay. And then as late as possible, I flew out heavily pregnant with a 1-year-old, just a couple of suitcases, and we came into Hobart, had an Airbnb, and just tried to figure out what we were going to do from there. Then we found a rental in Franklin, put a couple of cars, and that was it. That's how life started in Tasmania for us.
And what was it about Tasmania that attracted you?
It's the outdoors. It was the Isle of Man, but tenfold, much bigger, much more places to explore. And I think that's why we didn't settle back in the Isle of Man for my partner. It was just a little bit too small for us to be based. I'd been everywhere and seen everything and living the adventurous life. I just wanted to be able to experience as much as possible. So just fell in love. The seasons as well. Obviously a big part of my childhood, and I liked the seasons, definitely.
And where's your partner from?
He's from Sydney. Sydney was on the cards, but I just didn't think bringing kids up there would be the same as what would have been sort of being single there, and very different lifestyle. Like I said, the beauty of my childhood was using your imagination and having the freedom to be able to go out and explore. And I absolutely wanted that for my children. And having been based on the ocean for so long, I wanted to be able to, go off and venture off and experience some adventure on the land, really. So Tasmania seemed ideal for that. We had no idea what and where we were going to do, especially my partner, for work. So we rented in Franklin for a year, and then we ended up buying in Geeveston, because I think we said if we were going to commute to Hobart, an hour would be the maximum, really. When we moved here, a friend of ours who lives here, he sort of said, don't go and work for the fish farms and do not move to Geeveston. And when my partner first arrived, he ended up working on the fish farms, and we bought a house in Geeveston. But it is a beautiful community down there. It's had a slow, I think, integration of people, and so it's been a good mix, yeah. I think we've been here 7 years this year, and then by the time COVID hit, we'd been here sort of 2 or 3 years. And we saw that big influx of people moving down. And within about 1.5 years to 2 years later, that is sort of, quite a large proportion of those people then moving somewhere else. You think of Tasmania, beautiful to have a bit of land, but it's a good sort of challenging. If you've got the land, you have to manage it. It's not as dreamy and easy as I think a lot of people anticipate. I thought I'd move and I'd get a patch of land and I'd instantly be able to grow vegetables and I'd know what I'm doing and I'd have my chickens, but it's not like that at all. My veggie garden is still a mess after several years of being here. I'm very proud of myself. I managed to grow my first pumpkin this year, so slowly catch a monkey, I think. We were fortunate enough that, having worked on super yachts, we'd managed to save quite a lot of money. So the first 6 months we were down here, obviously I had my second child and he just took the time off. Then, it came about and he started working on the fish farms. And I eventually, when the boys were a little bit older, started working out at Huon. So sort of got my first taste of land-based adventure, kind of outdoorsy role. Since then, kind of moved on. He's now working over at Woodbridge School, at the Marine Discovery Centre. He drives the boat over there, which is just loves doing. And I'm now working for Parks, so sort of finally found our place, I think, in terms of work.
Yeah, I should probably just get you to explain what Huon is. I know I've been there several times, so I know, but...
Yeah, so Huon is this beautiful part of land out of Geeveston in the forest out there, and they've got like this big treetop walk. There's Huon Pine Walk, so I guess it gives tourists a safe experience of the... So I started when they reopened, but then COVID hit, so then it was sort of just a skeleton crew, I think, for a while, so I wasn't working. I would have been up there maybe 2 or 3 years in total. Mm-hmm. And then I just fancied a bit of a change, and an opportunity came up to work down at Hastings Caves as a cave guide.
Okay. And how did you get into that?
I have to be honest, I wasn't a massive fan of caves before I got the job. Yeah. But yeah, it was an experience. It was a new experience, sort of having worked in tourism all my life. So it was definitely a very interesting role to be a cave guide.
So your kids both still fairly young?
The eldest is 9 and the youngest is 7. So the oldest was born in the Isle of Man, so he's very proud of that. The oldest one loves being outdoors. He definitely thrives on it. They're both keen on going for hikes, and I kind of maybe pushed them and tried to instill that, to really embrace where they're growing up. They realise, we always say, you're so lucky to be able to live in such a beautiful place and get to experience this. I mean, it's ideal. You've got the ocean, you've got the mountains, you've got the snow. You ticks a lot of boxes, I think.
You said your eldest was kind of proud of being born in the Isle of Man, but what does he know about the Isle of Man?
So we've been back and visited a few times. Okay. My family are all still there, and pretty much all in the same village as well. Okay. And so yeah, he remembers it. He has a real good memory, and he remembers going out with Grandad to go pulling the lobster pots and things like that. So definitely moments like that he really embraces. He wears shorts every day, even though it's freezing cold, and he says, because I'm from the Isle of Man, things like that, That's
a very Tasmanian thing too.
Yeah, so. It is. His younger brother has always been wearing pants. He's started to wear shorts now as well. It seems like a rite of passage, I think, down here maybe.
Like we talked a little bit before about some of the things that are a bit unique to the Manx culture. Yeah. Like when you went to school, did you learn any Manx, or was there any Manx taught at school?
They were trying to sort of introduce it, and I remember having a couple of lessons in Manx, and it was optional. But I was so young, I don't really remember anything. There's really quirky things about the Isle of Man. There's this bridge called Fairy Bridge, and when you pass it, I think you've got to say Maramai Carni Veg, which means good morning little people, because they don't speak English, so it's rude to speak to them in English, and for some reason they don't like being called fairies, so you refer to them as the little people. And it's on the main route into town, so even if you're sitting on the bus, you'll see everybody quickly give them a wave, because if you don't, it's bad luck. And there's lots of superstitious things like that on the island. Okay. That are very quirky. There's a certain type of rodent that you can't refer to, so it's called a longtail. So again, Isaac, my eldest, he won't call that rodent by its name. And when he was learning to read, his teacher's like, "Oh, you've got to say it." And he said, "No, I'll get bad luck. I'm not saying that."
Right. Sometimes, on islands, little islands, especially where the same families have been living generations, these unique traditions build up.
Yeah.
Don't they?
They do. And the folklore as well. The guard of the Isle of Man itself, which is where the emblem stems from, the 3 legs, the Manannan, and he would be on the only mountain on the island, Snaefell, and if anyone sort of came towards the island, he'd cast a cloak of mist. I guess it has the similarities down here in the Huon Valley. You get that mist on those cool days. And if they became too close, he would sort of roll down the hill, legs on fire, to deter them from the island. So our sort of emblem is, whichever way you throw me, I shall always stand, which I think is a really nice and unique sort of thing to have.
Yeah, because for those who don't know, the Isle of Man flags are the 3 legs.
3 legs, yeah.
Are there any other traditions that are maybe unique to the Isle of Man? Or
there is. There's like a game that you play at Easter, and it's kind of like a hockey game. The name escapes me at the moment. I never participated in it, but there's a few different traditional things. And it's nice because everything is having a resurgence back on the island. So at one point when things were sort of felt like they were being lost, it's sort of coming back. There's Tynwald Day, which is where they get up and they recite all the changes in law, and they actually do that in the Manx language and then in the English language. So that's it's almost like a day where they have like a big fete and fair, and they read all the legislation, changes in the legislation out.
Oh, yeah, you should explain what the Tynwald is, actually. So that's something unique to the Isle of Man.
Yeah, so it's this sort of parliamentary hill, mound, I guess, where, because the Isle of Man has got its own government, and I think it's the oldest consecutive running government in the world as well. So I actually, ironically, bumped into a lady last week, and her husband lived on the Isle of Man for a little while, and there's lots of very old, unique laws, such as at one point they just changed it. I think if you were living in the town of Castletown and you came across a Scotsman, you could instantly shoot him on sight. Very quirky.
Hopefully not still live.
No, hopefully not anymore, no, because there's a few Scotsmen there, I'm sure.
Yes. What do you find in Tasmania similar or relatable to the Isle of Man, and what might be different?
Yeah, definitely the kind of the ruggedness of Tasmania, but on a much grander scale here in Tasmania. Like I said, we only have 1 mountain in the Isle of Man, and I don't know how many mountains we have here in Tasmania. Lots. And that, just the coastline. And I think, I love the winter here because it does sort of remind me of a large proportion of time back at home. And the weather. It was fantastic to be on the yachts and experience day in, day out with sunshine. But after a while, it becomes a bit kind of, you just want to experience a different form of weather. The apples, the seasons, the food. Yeah, definitely. The farming even reminds me of the Isle of Man. The differences, snakes and the wildlife. When we first moved down here, of a night time, you could hear the screams, and I was just like, what is that? What is making that noise? You definitely don't experience that in the Isle of Man. I guess just the outdoors lifestyle, really, but on a much grander scale here in Tasmania.
And what about the people and the community? Have you found that to be similar, or are there things that you've needed to adapt to?
No, it's been very similar. I think very fortunate down in Geeveston, you've got the Wairapiti Centre, which is for families, with young children. And like you say, it's been quite a sort of ingress of people down here. So it was ideal for me, with 2 small children, to meet people, and for the boys to meet other children that, that they're going to grow up with, hopefully most of their lives, and have that long-term friendship, I guess, those circles, which I still have with my friends that I went to school with. It was something my partner didn't really experience because they travelled around a lot when he was younger. And just have some security in that community. We all run around, look out for each other, and, soccer training on a Tuesday night, I can't make it, someone else will grab the child, and then someone else will bring his bag round because he's left it at training. And it's a wonderful sense of having a community around you. People here will stop and talk to you. which I guess I haven't always experienced in cities. Although there's more people, it's a lot lonelier. I mean, Geeveston's wonderful. They have like a feast on the first Thursday of every month. Okay. So that's a really community-based thing, and we met a lot of people doing that. And I guess you're maybe lacking the things that you're used to having in a city, that accessibility to doing certain sports and things, but you just adapt to find your people, I guess.
And what's maybe one thing that you've had to adapt to, or maybe what's the biggest adaptation?
Having a bit of land, it's not easy. You've got to manage it. Tasmanians generally, I find, quite hardy, tough people, Yeah, I guess not having my family around has been quite a big adaptation for me. And yeah, so it's similar but different. A
lot of people move to the Huon Valley area for a bit of a lifestyle change and for to grow vegetables and all that sort of thing. Was that sort of one thing that was in your mind as well?
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as we bought the house, I rushed out and bought 2 piglets, which then escaped and I couldn't find. So then I rushed out and bought another pig to find my piglets just across the road at a neighbour's house. So, I just thought, what a wonderful thing to have these piglets. But they were messy. They turned up the ground. They screamed at you. They weren't overly friendly, so I was quite happy when they got processed. But then we got hens, we've got a dog, we've got a horse that's not ours, but he helps to keep the grass down, and that's a good arrangement, really.
And is there anything about living in Tasmania, or certainly in Tasmania, that surprised you or that was unexpected?
The wilderness, I think. I hadn't really done much research on Tasmania, but just how incredible the wilderness is here. We've only really just started scratching the surface of travelling around and experiencing it, and how diverse it is as well, how different Geeveston is to like Queenstown, and I just think it's great to have all that sort of terrain here. Te tregol tai as gol